give me your second prospect to team fit that you really love.
Okay, so second one here is Dallas Turner going to the Falcons, pick 8 overall. And let's just cut to the chase here. Their pass rush last year left a lot to be desired. Their former defensive coordinator, Ryan Nielsen, did a pretty good job of manufacturing pressure with just sort of design blitzes and kind of organized chaos. But they didn't have a single player with more than 6.5 sacks. And you and I both know and follow enough people to champion the idea that sacks are not the only stat that matters as it pertains to pressure. But the bottom line is pressure was not nearly frequent enough from the Falcons last year defensively. And I think a lot of that was a personnel issue. You got a new head coach in Raheem Morris, who's a defensive guy. And I'm not saying that you have to do exactly what your coach wants all the time, because the GM does have the final say in this organization. But it doesn't hurt when you can make your head coach happy and draft a player in Dallas Turner who is the best athlete amongst all the edges in this year's class. I'll be honest with you, the best tape I watched of any edge this past year was clearly Leatu Latu from UCLA. There's some medical questions surrounding him, as he was actually forced to medically retire during his time at Washington. He resurfaced at UCLA, got clearance, so that's a reason why I think he could slide a touch in the first round. But Turner had an amazing combine on top of being the SEC Defensive Player of the Year this past season. Not quite in the tier of his teammate at Alabama, Will Anderson, but very, very good prospect. It gives Atlanta something that is so desperately needed, because after all that money they spent on offense in free agency, it's time for them to hack away on that defensive side of the ball.
I gather this is probably your first defensive pick in the mock, right?
Like it was, yes. Yeah. It was my first, and I will, without revealing the entirety of mock 2.0, it is again the first defensive pick in mock 2.0, and also one of very few in the first half of the first round. This is, everybody who's listening to this probably already knows, but we're talking about quarterback, wide receiver, offensive tackle central in the 2024 NFL draft.
Yeah, 100%, which means it's going to be exciting draft night for the Dynasty Bros. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
It's funny that you bring this up, though, that, last year, man, they really didn't have a great edge presence. Field, I don't know when you collected your first check doing NFL media work. I definitely think, though, the entire time I've covered the league, the last 10 years, we've been saying that about the Falcons for like 10 years now, that they need an edge rusher.
I know. It's amazing. Like, who was the last? Probably like John Abraham.
John Abraham, yeah.
There. Yeah. So it's been a while. They're desperate for it, but after going back-to-back skill player on offense, going from Kyle Pitts to Drake London to Bijan, it's time. Like, just hammer away on the defense. And I don't think the Falcons have done a very good job hiding their cards this offseason. They made it very clear they were going to pursue a quarterback. And I suspect that over the next 3.5 weeks prior to the draft, we'll hear a lot about the Falcons' need to beef up that pass rush.
I think Raheem Morris is going to be a very happy man to get a difference maker there in the top 10 first year in his regime. All right, we're staying on defense here with your third prospect to team fit.
Yeah, let's keep things rolling here. It's Nate Wiggins. This is further down the board. The Eagles pick number 22. Nate Wiggins goes there from Clemson. And if you're not familiar with his game, what you need to know is that Nate Wiggins can freaking fly. Had the fastest 40 of any defensive player at the combine. Obviously, Xavier Worthy ran the fastest 40 overall. It's 4.29 for Nate Wiggins. At the combine, he weighed 173 pounds, which is very light. He bulked up to over 180 pounds. I think it was at 185. It is maybe 183 at his pro day. So the trick of the combine is, like, you simultaneously want these guys to do really well in some of the on-field drills, but it will change their preparation for the combine specifically. So it might be that Nate Wiggins said, let me get down as light as possible to run the fastest 40, then let me bulk back up. But his speed really shows up on tape. And Philly's lack of speed really showed up down the stretch last season. They've got two awesome veteran corners, and James Bradbury and also Darius Slay have been very good for a long time, but speed is just such a deficiency for this team. They need to basically spend every asset they have available in the draft on defense. They have some holes to fill on offense as well. They got to be thinking long-term about some of the offensive line pieces, specifically Lane Johnson. He'll be 34 later on this offseason. But if I'm Philly, the opportunity to draft a speedy corner is too good to ignore. And I'm sure, again, coach influence here. I think Vic Fangio would be very happy about some defensive reinforcement at the top of the draft.
I imagine when you're doing a mock draft that the Eagles are one of these teams that you feel pretty confident that maybe you don't know the exact player, but you get a general sense of the position, right? Because Howie Roseman has showed us over the long tenure that he's had there as a GM, like he has only taken premium positions, which obviously cornerback fits into the group here.
Yeah, I will say this though. After they signed Saquon Barkley, I've now prepared myself for something weird from Philly, right? If you told me that the Eagles, and this, maybe 2 months ago, like well before free agency, would be a top suitor or eventually the top suitor for Saquon Barkley, I would have thought, like just no way. They don't do that. And now they do that. So I'm starting to wonder whether Philly will keep us on our toes during the draft. But this would not be a situation where they're keeping us on our toes. This would be predictable, and we like predictability in the draft.
Could you imagine, you would know this better than me. I'm not grinding linebacker tape. I got enough receivers to worry with in this draft class, but I don't think there's a linebacker that's necessarily like a consensus first round pick. But could you imagine in one off season, Howie Roseman spends like near top of market money at running back and then drafts a linebacker in the first round? It's like, cats and dogs living together field, oil and water. What are we doing here?
We'd have to talk to Jeffrey Lurie, their owner, and see whether Howie Roseman was still in charge. There probably isn't a guy at 22 amongst the linebackers that I would feel really comfortable taking. Edgerrin Cooper from Texas A&M might end up being the highest drafted linebacker. Peyton Wilson from NC State I thought was the best linebacker on film from this past season, but he's got a major shoulder and knee injury on the ledger. And as you know, NFL teams all have their own evaluation of where guys are at health-wise, but generally speaking, they're going to defer to the guy who's got that cleaner medical history if there is any concern whatsoever on a guy like Wilson being, more of a risk if something happens once again.